Now I'd like to introduce Alexis Hansen, Assemblywoman for Assembly District 32. Alexis will be doing part of our presentation tonight. Use that.
I've never used one of these, so this will be interesting. Do you want me just to do an introduction of myself for the most part, and then I'm going to do some Q&A with you afterwards. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Alexis Hansen. I was elected to the Nevada legislature in 2018. I am going into my 4th term. I've loved serving with Assemblyman Ken Gray. He's been a great addition to the team. He's going into his 2nd term, and so he's done really well and learned quickly. He came as a county commissioner, so he had some of that experience. I wanted to mention we have a chairman commissioner, a Lyon County Commissioner, Scott Keller, here with us, and he was just recently elected to be the chairman. So, and our best wishes to Vida, his wife, who was a former county commissioner and is gone under the weather, as so many of us have in the last, I think, 6 or 8 weeks. So a little bit about me, just so you know who this person is. Ken has the wonderful opportunity of representing you in the state legislature, but we all represent the entire state of Nevada, but we more specifically are really in tune with the needs of our constituents and our communities. I live in Sparks in Spanish Springs. My family's been in Nevada for 5 generations, since 1878. And my husband is Senator Ira Hansen. We were the first married couple elected at the same time to the state legislature to serve at the same time. So that was a big honor for us. We own a small plumbing business in the Sparks area, and we've been married 44 years this year, and we are parents of 8 children and 24 grandchildren. So
Eight children.
8. We have 8
Wow.
children, 4 girls, 4 boys, and I'm glad to say they have been very good in their political persuasions. And so I'm glad to say that, I'm kind of growing my own where I can to fill in the needs. And so very proud of them. I serve on judiciary, education, and natural resources. My district is 6 counties, so I have 33,000 square miles. So I have a large chunk of Washoe. I have all of Lander County, all of Humboldt County, all of Pershing, a little bit of Eureka County, and a western sliver of Elko County. So my district is very urban and rural. So natural resource issues are really big and important in my district, as well as urban issues, too. But I love that interface. I think that's what Assemblyman Gray gets as well. He gets that rural and that urban interface. So I look forward to being able to talk to you more and take questions after you hear from our very capable. I've known Kevin for quite a few years. Our kids went to school together at one point when they were little, and he has served in a capacity that is very impressive, advocating in some different groups in the state and been involved as our caucus director, we call it. He's our executive director, so he kind of gets to herd the Republican cats in our caucus and helps us at the drop of a hat. So I might have 8 children, but he has 15 in the Nevada legislature that he has to take care of. So anyway, yeah, he didn't have any, he didn't no kids yet, but he has us kids. So anyway, thank you for being here. Such a great turnout. Appreciate the pastor and your community, Jim and Deanne, for what you're doing. This is really important, and we want to be available for you, and we want you to know how to be engaged in the process, and not only be engaged, but be able to be effective with your time and your energies and your passions so that you can feel like you're being heard, even though sometimes you might feel like you're not. We're here to kind of reassure you that you can be heard. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Alexis. Assemblywoman Henson. And Kevin, can you join me up here? As Alexis mentioned, Kevin is the executive director of the Nevada GOP caucus, and although his job is with the GOP, his role here is not partisan, but rather educational. Nope.
Working there better? Okay, yeah, thanks for the introduction. Thanks for showing up. I actually used to be a teacher, so I'm going to teach you some stuff. Hopefully everybody did the homework. Hopefully everybody did the reading. There'll be a pop quiz. There's going to be a test. No, but really, I appreciate everyone being here. Just for my own curiosity, how many of you have been on Nellis before and read a bill or just done any interaction with like the Nevada legislature of any kind, really? A couple hands. Okay. Obviously you, Alexis. Okay, it's good to see that a lot of hands didn't go up, so that's why you're here. You guys are obviously curious about how this all works. So you want me to jump in? Or?
I've got a couple more things,
Okay,
and then we'll turn it over to you.
All right.
So we hope to post the video of this online, so you can look at it again later. You can share it with friends and neighbors and family and things like that, and we'll be able to let you know where that is if you fill out your email in that attendance sheet. We also have a manual that we can email you from that's the manual for the Nellis system, and Kevin will be tell you what Nellis is. But we'll be able to email you the manual if you provide us that email as well. On the tables, each table should have a little sheet that shows a little Wi-Fi symbol, and there's instructions to what the network name is here and what the password is. So if you want to follow along or do anything with Nellis live, as Kevin is instructing you, you'll be able to use our network here and not rely on your cell data. Also, if you happen to do it on a cell phone, there's a QR code that'll help link you up with that network here. As far as questions, if you have an immediate question that's like clarification for the particular topic at hand while it's going on with our speakers, please be free to ask that question. But if you have questions on other topics, we're going to be having that Q&A session at the end. And if you could hold that question till then, that would be great. And so without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Kevin and go for it. Thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully this is still working. All right, yeah, like he said, so if you've got your laptops, cell phones, any device, I think I saw somebody on an iPad, it may look a little bit different than what I'm doing up here, and actually hopefully it'll show what I'm doing up here. I think they're switching it over now. So the first thing is I mentioned Nellis. Some of you may not, based on the judge of hands, you may not even know what I'm talking about right off the bat, so I'll kind of start at square one. Nellis stands for Nevada Electronic Legislative Information Service. So there's a lot of bells and whistles with it. You can really go in depth, but I'll give you guys really what the basic function is to track bills, read bills, and just see all the bills. There's a lot. In the legislature, every session, there's somewhere around 1,000, sometimes a little bit more than that. So there's a lot to go through. And some bills are short, some bills are long, but you don't know it until you read them. So Nellis isn't actually a website. It's an app technically in a website. So if you're starting on square one, you're going to want to go to a website, leg.state.nv.us. And that's what this website is here. So once you're there, some of you have probably already seen it, but there's Nellis kind of at the top. And we'll get there in a second. I just want to go over a little bit of the legislature website because there's a lot of stuff here. For example, there's videos of archived events. You can even apply to go work at the legislature if that's something you're interested in. There's an events calendar. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can go through. But that's not really the meat and potatoes. I just wanted to kind of point out a few things. But like I said, if you click on Nellis, that's the bulk of what we're going to talk about. So if you're there and you're able to click on Nellis and you're on the Wi-Fi and everything's going smoothly, you should see something that looks about like this. So kind of looks similar to the last website, except you'll see a couple different things. You can sign in or register, and that's actually the first thing we're going to do. So if you click on sign in or register, if you happen to have already created an account before, then just sign in. But most of you are probably going to need to register, and it's kind of a basic registration. You put in your information, whatever you want your username to be, your email address, whatever you want your password to be. You're going to have, there's a few steps, so I'll kind of pause here for a minute or two while people fill that out. I see a couple people going through it. If you're just following along, maybe look how one of your neighbors is going through it. But then when you're all through, you got to click, you're not a robot. I don't think anybody in here is a robot, doesn't look like it. Then you register. And if you think you may have created an account in the past, there's a way to recover it. If you can't remember the password or you don't know what email you used, there's a feature there for that. But I think most of you are just going to be starting creating the account. And they're probably not in right now, but if you ever need help, there is a phone number or an email that you can send if you have questions. That's not just for like legislators or people, that's for the general public. So if you need help logging in, if you created a username and password and it's just not working, feel free to call them. I won't say call me because, you know, they're going to handle the technical difficulties. I'll give you guys just another minute. I see a lot of people have stopped typing, but there's a few still going through it. Don't want to leave anybody behind. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Nevada, yeah, 1L. Nevada Electronic Legislative Information System. So just, yeah, the 1L. Good. Yeah, that's a good point. I think if you're having just technical problems with Wi-Fi, let somebody know because we don't want anybody too far left behind. And if for some reason it's just not working, you're putting something in and you can't create an account, that's fine. You can always go back and do it later. Most of what I'm going to show you doesn't require that you have it. I just wanted to give people time to do it now while we're here all working on it together. Is there anybody that needs like a minute or two more, or are we good to move forward? Not seeing anybody? All right. So once you register, you can come back to the main page of Nellis, 1L Nellis. Below that, you got this select a session. So it should default to the upcoming 2025 session. But just to make sure, if you click on it, you can go back to previous sessions. So there's the 82nd back in 2023. So if you're not aware, Nevada only meets every other year in odd-numbered years. Nevada has a part-time legislature, very part-time legislature. People have day jobs. We meet every other year. I like it. I think it's a good way to keep government in check, but there's pros and cons. So if you weren't already defaulted there, make sure you're clicked on the 2025 session, because if you're under another session, some of the stuff I might show you might not connect with what you're seeing if you're on a different year. So up at the top, the other thing it shows you just the current date. It tells you when the legislature is going to begin, so February 3rd. We're all kind of feeling the weight of that date approaching. On the home page, you also have this bar that's going to be most of what we go over, but I just want to go over some other stuff on the front page because it is useful to know some of these upcoming deadlines. A lot of these kind of get in the weeds with more like staff or legislators, but I just want to point out a couple things that are kind of important deadlines. So you'll see down here, Friday, April 11th, that's when the committee passage deadline is, so that the bill process is every bill has to first get passed out of a committee, and then it gets voted on by the House as a whole, and then the two houses switch, and the whole process starts over again. So the first committee passage, that's an important deadline, April 11th. Tuesday, April 22nd is the first House passage. That's when things really start to ramp up. After that, there's a little bit of a lull, but then you can see May 16th, you've got the second House committee passage. So after the bills swap houses, so all the Assembly bills go over to the Senate. Senate bills all go over to the Assembly, at least the ones that pass. Then they pass it out of committee again. There's some budget deadlines, but the main ones I wanted to point out were just these passage deadlines. So May 23rd is the second House passage, and that's the deadline. If it hasn't passed out of both houses by then, there are a few exempt bills, and those are mostly budget bills, but most of the policy bills, the vast majority of them need to be done by May 23rd, otherwise they're dead. There's a more in-depth calendar if you come back up here. So those were just kind of the top lines of deadlines, but if you click on this calendar, it's kind of useful to know. I have one of these hanging up right by my desk, and pretty much every legislator has one of these, and you cross out the days as we go through, and it's kind of like a nice little countdown till we get to the end of session. But it shows you every day in the 120-day session. That's how long we have. So it starts on February 3rd. All the blue days are Mondays, so it shows you the beginning of each week. It includes weekends on here. Not that we work every weekend, but especially towards the end of session, we do come in on weekends. So the 120 days isn't just 120 weekdays. We work on weekends. And then at the end, June 2nd, that's the 120 days. That's what they call sine die. That's it. It's over, done. Anything else that needs to be done, the governor has to call a special session. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but that's the process of how that works. We get 120 days every other year in Nevada to do all of our legislation. That's it. That's constitutionally how it is. The only exception is, like I said, if the governor calls a special session. I'll go back to this. So the main thing that we're going to talk about is legislation. So this bar right here is very important. It's going to have the legislation, all the bills. It's going to have budgets, if that's your thing. I mean, that really gets in the weeds, and we can talk about that a little bit. The committees, so like Alexis said, she serves on different committees, but there's 10 committees in the assembly in all. There's health and human services, education, covering all the topics. Meetings and floor sessions, I'll just go ahead and click on it right now, but there's nothing scheduled. I just want to kind of talk about what it at least looks like. Takes a minute to load. But that's where, if you plan on attending any of the meetings, this is where you're going to see what's upcoming for the week. So you can choose the date span. Right now it's just set to today. There were no meetings today. Obviously the session hasn't met yet. But if you wanted to change the dates in here, say, you put in February, or, you can put in a week, you can put in a month, you can put in a whole session if you want to see everything that's happening. Sometimes meetings get scheduled a little last minute, so I wouldn't just check once and be done with it. You're going to want to make sure you're keeping up on any last minute meetings. If there's a bill you're tracking, and you want to make sure you don't miss it. I'll go back to legislation, though, because there's quite a bit in here. If you click on legislation, it opens up this little drop-down with a lot. So the first thing is all bills and resolutions. So that's a lot. We won't start there. There's reports and links, which there's nothing there yet, but that's where they do like economic forum reports, budget reports. You can search bills and resolutions here, but you can also do it down here. One of the place I like to start, because I'm in the assembly, and just to keep it bite-sized chunks for you all, let's go ahead and click on Assembly Bills. And you should get a page that looks like this: Bill and Resolution Information. So you can scroll down, and there's some filters. And because I clicked on Assembly Bills, it automatically applied the Assembly Bill filter here, but you could do like Senate bills, or there's several other filters, Assembly Resolutions. So right now there's only 113. They're still drafting up bills. That number is going to climb a lot. Not that 113 isn't a lot, but I'm used to having to read 1,000 bills. So right now this is actually pretty manageable. I'm working in the office with 2 other policy guys. I think the 3 of us could probably get through these 113 bills in a few days. So don't want to overwhelm you guys. This is manageable. Obviously, we're working full-time. We're getting paid to do it, so that's a little bit different. But working in teams, it is possible to go through the bills. So as you scroll, you can see there's 3 pages of bills. I think it lists 50. Yeah, view 50. If you wanted to view 100, 200, or all, you could just do it in one page. But then it just goes numerically. So you got AB1. AB stands for Assembly Bill 1. And it gives you a basic description. Voids certain regulations relating to the development and disposal of land in the Fort Mojave Valley. So pretty dry. Some of you probably might be able to guess what that's sort of getting at. But if you want to read the bill, you click on that link, AB1. And it takes you to this view right here. It gives you an overview of the bill. You can click on some of this other stuff if you want to read the text of it. Any amendments to the bill? Right now there are no amendments because obviously we're not in session. There's no votes, there's no fiscal notes, there's nothing. This is a bill that hasn't been introduced in session yet. I'll jump back to a previous session just to show you all what it looks like when there's a bill that has amendments, when there's votes, and how you can look at all that. But right now, it's kind of nice to just look at a blank slate bill. So it's not too cluttered. It's just the bill as it's been introduced. Tells you the introduction date, that same summary we read on the other page. Tells you if there's any fiscal notes. That's an important thing to look for. So is there an effect on the local government? It says no. Is there an effect on the state? It says no. Those are good things to flag. If it says yes under any of those, it means that this bill costs money. So that's something you're going to want to look at. That's probably a bill that, especially us in the Republican legislature, we want to know, okay, this bill costs money. How much? Do we have the money for it? What's the purpose? But this bill doesn't cost any money. It's just a law. It tells you who the sponsor is. So bills can be sponsored either by legislators directly, so Alexis can sponsor a bill, or committees, agencies under the executive branch can also have bills. There's actually quite a number of different entities that can get bills, but the main ones are either committees or legislators themselves. So it tells you right here the primary sponsor is the Assembly Committee on Government Affairs. And I'll come back up to that because you can actually, any of these blue things, you can click, any of these like blue links are clickable. So it tells you the most recent history action from printer. That just means it's a bill, it's been printed, it exists. I'll show you on a bill later what a bill with a lot of actions has. So there's no scheduled hearings, there's no past hearings, there's no votes, there's no conference committees, there's just the bill text. So you can either click on the bill text here, or if you scroll back up to the top of this, you can get to the text here. Either way, it takes you to the same spot. So if we just click text, it tells you that this is the bill as introduced. So if it had amendments, it would tell you that this was the first reprint, second reprint, however many amendments it had. It'll make sense later when I show you a bill that actually has this stuff. But right now, the bill doesn't have anything, so it's just as introduced. You can scroll down. We got lucky. It's only a 2-page bill, not very long. And so here you have a PDF version of the bill. So if you wanted to print it out for whatever reason and mark it with a highlighter and do that physically, or just for whatever reason you want to print it out, if you want to save it, it's just a PDF here. So anything you want to do with a PDF, print, download, save it, you can do that here. You can zoom in, you can zoom out. In fact, I'll zoom out a little bit. It is a little zoomed in for my taste. I think that probably looks a little better. So when you're looking at a bill, based on the hands I saw earlier, probably not a lot of you have gotten to this point where you've seen a bill. Has anybody read a bill in Nevada before, either on the computer? A few of you. Okay. So this is it. This is a bill. Luckily, we got a 2-page one right off the bat. But it tells you some of the information I went over earlier. On the bill, it tells you Committee on Government Affairs. So that's who introduced the bill. It gives you a short little parentheses if it was done on behalf of someone else. So this was on behalf of the Colorado River Commission of Nevada. They just put that in there because the Colorado Commission doesn't get their bills. So what they did was they asked the Committee on Government Affairs if they would carry a bill to fix something for them. That's what that means. Pre-filed September 27th. That just means that's the date that they turned it in to the legislature to begin the process of making it a bill. Pre-filed just means because they did it last year, it was pre-filed since session hadn't started. It's kind of a distinction without a difference. So it's getting referred to the Committee on Government Affairs, meaning when it has to go through the hearing process, that's where it's going to go. It's going to start in Government Affairs. When it gets scheduled, we don't know. We'll have to wait and see when that gets scheduled. So there's a quick summary. Voids certain regulations relating to the development and disposal of land in the Fort Mojave Valley. So now we have a little bit more information. We know that it voids certain regulations. We're still not sure what that means. We're going to have to read the bill. But it gives us that same information before. Fiscal note. Any effect on local government? No. Any effect on the state? No. And then one last time, we have kind of a overview. An act relating to public lands, declaring void certain regulations relating to development and disposal of land in the Fort Mojave Valley, and providing other matters properly relating thereto. Kind of a vague sentence at the end. We're going to have to read the bill to find out what exactly it's doing. This Legislative Council Digest is kind of a summary that the Legislative Council, the legislative lawyers provide. Sometimes their summaries can almost be a little bit more complicated than the bill itself, and I'll show you because I picked this bill on purpose. But have you found that to be the case? Sometimes I read the digest and they say, well, this is a summary and it condenses everything. And I'm like, it's more complicated than the bill. But they do provide a little context. So sometimes they'll tell you, like, in past sessions, bills that were passed that are connected to this bill. So it's complicated, but it gives you a broader sense. So that's what this Council Digest is doing here. So see, right off the bat, it's talking about Senate Bill 301 in the 2007 legislature. So it's giving you the context of, almost 20 years ago. Useful to have, but it's still not telling us what the bill does exactly. So if we come down and we read the bill, which starts on page 2, the people of the state of Nevada represented in Senate Assembly do enact as follows. That's just kind of a formality, but then you have Section 1, Section 2. I mean, bills can run into the hundreds of sections, so we are lucky here with 2 sections. Section 1, the regulations adopted by the Colorado River Commission of Nevada, which are codified as NAC 321.100 to 321.2300, inclusive, are hereby declared void. So now we know what the bill does, or at least part of it. If you wanted to know what it does, you can go look up those NAC Nevada codes, read them, and say, okay, those are now void. That's what this bill is doing. Doesn't give us the full answer because now we got to go read what those regulations are, but that's what the bill does. It's voiding those specific regulations. In preparing supplements to the Nevada Administrative Code on or after the effective date of this act, the Legislative Council shall remove those regulations. So it's just giving an enforcement provision. This act becomes effective upon passage and approval. So it's effective as soon as it's passed out of the legislature. Sometimes they'll specify that it's effective, the October after the legislature. There's different dates when bills become effective, so they're specifying that there. Pretty straightforward in the sense of we know what the bill does, we would just need to go and read those regulations. But that's a whole other rabbit hole. But at least it could get you started with, okay, I know what this bill does. What are those regulations? Well, now we got to go read them. Yes, the technology exists not within Nellis. So the Republicans actually paid for kind of a beefed up version of Nellis called Quorum. It's like a third-party company. Because Nellis is provided by the state. It's free. It's a public thing that anyone can use. So we actually had to pay some money for something, but it does integrate AI for that exact reason. So we could say, what is this bill doing? I mean, you could literally ask AI, what does this bill do? And it'll give you a 2-paragraph summary. In a bill like this, it's only a paragraph, but it's referring you to all these regulations that you got to go read. So it's a small bill, but it's not. But you could do that in AI. You could say, summarize what these Nevada Administrative Code 321.100 through 321.230, summarize it, and then you'll know what is being deleted. The system I was talking about? No, that's something we had to pay for. So it's like an in-house thing. But there are free AIs out there. If you wanted to do it, you could just ask a generic AI. But no, that system's like an in-house, closed thing. But the staff uses it, the legislators use it. It was just we only get a certain number of accounts because we had to pay for them. So yeah, but it does exist. It's out there. Hopefully someday, once AI becomes kind of ubiquitous, they'll integrate it into Nellis. I think that would be where we're headed. So someday, but not for now. Now, unfortunately, we got to do it all ourselves. We can't have AI for the most part. One other thing I want to point out, because that's a pretty short bill, but say you're somebody who specializes in this topic and you're familiar with this topic and you already know what those, if you have background in this, and you really disagree with that, and you're like, wait a minute, why are they deleting these? And you want to keep track of this bill, there is a button at the top right called tracking. So if you click that, I'm not signed in, but if you are signed in, you could click tracking. And since I'm not signed in, it's just trying to tell me about tracking, which we can go over. But it'll flag that bill for you. So like I said, there's 113 bills out right now, and say you went through all of them, you had the time and you went through all of them, but there were only 2 or 3 that stood out to you as you were concerned about. Well, that's where you'd want to track them. And you say, well, the rest of them didn't seem bad to me, but there's 2 or 3 that I want to keep an eye on. That's how you would do that. So that's a really important feature. If you are logged in and you're able to hit the tracking feature, I would recommend just trying it with this bill, make sure it works, because if you're having issues with that feature, it's an extremely important feature that I would make sure that it works for you. Any questions so far? So we kind of went through our first bill, and I'll stop here for a few questions. Yeah. Oh, you're signed in and you're... Yeah, that may be a new... Maybe that's what we were talking about. Maybe they're making you sign up for tracking. That may be a new thing because it used to just kind of do it automatically. Oh, I think that's new. Okay. Well, you get 10 for free, so... I mean, you can always write down in your own note system. I mean, it makes it easier, but if you want to track more than 10 bills, you just got to write them down. I guess they're trying to make money. I mean, that's disappointing, but I guess it is what it is. So yeah,
Kevin?
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'll interject something along that lines, because this is new, where you can't just track endless amounts of bills, which I disagree with. What's helpful, what I've seen groups do, church groups, other advocacy groups, you set up a legislative committee, and you kind of segment into issues that are important to your community. So say religious freedom, and this group's going to track any bill to do with religious freedom, then you'll get that many, right? Then you have another group in the committee that will track another subject. Maybe it's Second Amendment, or maybe it's you pick. We know there's many. And that way, you can kind of get around it. You can have your different people being the one who sign up, and then they get that many. So,
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because, I mean, how many people do we have in this room? If everybody gets 10, I mean, you guys could track quite a number of bills. You just have to coordinate with each other. You know, you're tracking these 10 bills, you're tracking these 10 bills, so you just have to, and break it down by committee. Who's tackling the education bills? Who's tackling the natural resources bills? That's a great way to do it. So yeah.
And one other thing, it'll be like the Tom and Jerry show here. Another thought along those lines is just keep in mind 1,100 bills, around 1,000 to 1,100 get introduced. Last session was the lowest amount of bills we really got through since I've been there. We got about 600 and something passed, but the governor vetoed 75. So that put us in the 500 range. So keep this in mind. The majority of the bills that happen in the Nevada legislature, 80 to 85% of them, kind of, they're bipartisan or they're unanimous. I think it's like in the 50% range or a little more than that. They're unanimous. So a lot of them are just maybe getting rid of some regulatory language, maybe enabling we're what's called a Dillon rule state, where the state gives the authority to the counties and the municipalities. So when Chair Keller needs something in his county, it might be something the state legislature needs to enable him to do with some vague or even specific language. He'll come to us, their commission will come to us, somebody will sponsor a bill. Now, a bill like that, typically, depending on what we're enabling, not a problem, not controversial. So think about that, about 80 to 85%, not a problem. It's going to be about 12 to 15% where we break down partisan lines, where you find the controversial issues, where you're going to find religious freedom, where you're going to find some other stuff. So think of it in that regard, so you're not so overwhelmed at the thought that, oh my gosh, you got 1,100 bills, I got to track all these. You really have about 12 to 15% of those bills, but tracking them is important. Those 12 to 15% are going to be really crucial. And so I highly recommend that legislative oversight group in your community to find out. And if you don't already subscribe to some newsletters, whether it be Turning Point USA, they probably have their state person keeping you in touch. You'll be able to kind of keep track of these bills that way. Thank you, Kevin. Sorry.
Yeah, no, good. It's a good point. Yeah, like I mentioned kind of towards the beginning, all those different deadlines, every deadline that comes up is kind of a day that a bunch of bills die. So, the first committee passage, a bunch of bills don't make it, they're dead. First House passage, a bunch of bills don't make it, they're dead. So every deadline that approaches, just more and more bills kind of fall off the list, making it easier. But it starts to make it more important because every deadline that they pass means the likelihood that they keep going. So you really need to understand what's in these bills, because as they pass, you're like, okay, now they really stand a chance of becoming law. We need to make sure we understand this. I wanted to point something else out that's going to be pretty useful for everyone when tracking bills or when going through. There's this little button on the right here that says opinions. That is a really nice feature because it records everyone's opinion, and legislators do look at that. So if there's a really controversial bill with hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of opinions that the public has gone on and put on there, you can see how many opinions are in favor and how many opinions are against. So if you have a bill that just has thousands of people against it, it's easy data to look up, and what are the controversial bills, and legislators look at that. They go, whoa, I didn't know this bill was so controversial. I might want to take a look at it again. I might not want to vote for it. So the first thing when you click on it is you select your position. Say, you read a bill and you're like, this is horrible. There's no way this can pass. So you go oppose. It gives you support, oppose. Neutral is kind of a weird one. It makes sense. I used to wonder, why is neutral even an option? Why would you take the time to be neutral on a bill? But a lot of what people use that for, and it's more lobbyists use it for, they say, we're neutral on this bill because there's some bad things in it, but we think that we can fix them with an amendment. So at this time, we're just going to say we're neutral on it. We're not against it. We're not for it. We need to see more work done on the bill before but they want that opinion recorded. So if you wanted to take the time to do that and say, this bill does some good things, but I'd like to see some of the bad stuff amended out. It's going to ask for your first name and last name, your address. It doesn't publish any of that. It's just for recording purposes. They want to make sure the same person isn't logging 30 oppose, and it looks like the bill's really opposed, but it's not. It's just the same person doing it over and over again. City, state, zip code, phone, email, and then any comments, if you wanted to write. Obviously, they're not going to look at comments that are using foul language or anything. I, really hate this bill. Probably not the most eloquent way to get your point across. If you have a well-worded and coherent argument, this is the place to put that. And you can do it all from the safety of your own home. See another hand up. Yeah, go for it. Yeah. No, it's not sending it to anybody specific, but people can, it's public, so you can see, like I said, your information is not public, but whether you supported it or opposed it is public, and so, some bills, nobody takes the time to really do that on. There's some bills that are just benign, nobody cares about them, but you can imagine the controversial subjects get quite a bit of people going on and opposing and supporting. And legislators look at that, and it shows them oh, maybe this bill is not going to be something we want to pass.
Kevin,
so that's really important.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
just to clarify. So the way I call them assistants, but in the assembly we have attachés, a fancy word for my right-hand person. So Kelly, my attaché, she and all the other attachés or the legislative assistants on the Senate side, they print those opinions out for us, so we have the hard copy on our desk. So we don't have to go and look for them. We're so busy. We have 120 days, 1,100 bills, a gazillion floor votes, committee votes. The pace is crazy. So they put those in front of us. And when we're going into a work session, which you might cover in a few, where we're going to actually have to vote in a committee to get it out, to go to the floor, they've tallied up, if they're a good attaché or legislative assistant, They've tallied up, so we see it. You had 475 against, and you had 210 for. And so those probably, if you don't mind me saying so, that is probably one of the most effective things you can do, is to go onto the website and log into Nellis, because you have to log into Nellis, as opposed to just going on the website. That first thing you saw was the website for the Nevada legislature with the menu of all kinds of things, really great things, view meetings, all that. But you got to log into Nellis and have that account with your name and stuff so that you can log that opinion, and that's how we see it. Now, granted, you could send us an email, but I'll tell you, our emails are they blow up. And then when we're not in session, we don't have staff. We're handling all our own emails. So I can't say enough about how important this opinion thing is, and that's why God bless the individuals who put together this meeting so that you can learn to do this, because having been involved in this process a lot of years, even outside of being an elected official, I find the opinion option on this to be probably one of the top things, other than you showing up. Oh, yeah, and that's why it's important. That's why, yes, and I even saved mine. I have stacks and stacks of them still from prior sessions. That's why what you write is important. Short and to the point, okay? Not inflammatory. I know, I've been there. I can't tell you how pissed I get during session. I have to go out the building and walk around and take a breath and, make sure I'm not a cursing woman, but being an elected official, I've really had to struggle with that. So it's a very frustrating process, so I get the pain that we all feel, but do your best to just say it succinctly. Don't do chain emails, don't do chain opinions. Go in and just state the facts. Why you don't like the bill or why you do like the bill. And if it's a couple of lines, 3 lines, sure, we read them. At least I do, and I know Senator Hansen does. The opinions go to they go on a site. Yeah, every legislator gets them. If it's in the assembly, every legislator, and then your assistant will print them out. And we don't see your personal information, but every legislator gets them. So if you have somebody who's for the bill and you're saying you're against it and say I'm on your side, they're still seeing that you're against it.
You have to verify, because they don't want the same person. Yeah. So if you did it under somebody else's address, and then they went to do it, it wouldn't let them. They'd be like, well, what? It would say they already typed a comment. Like, no, I didn't. So it's like voter fraud, essentially. You can only vote once. So you got to have it attached to an address. Because, if there was no way to do it, you could just have one person on there doing it hundreds of times, and they go, wow, this bill's really unpopular. But it's just one guy who's really, really mad. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, you should still be able to do it, but you're logged in? Yeah, it is hard. I would definitely recommend, if you have the option to do this on a computer, it is a little easier. But if the phone's what you got, then it still works. But there's a lot, and so I have an easier time. I mean, I'd sit all day and do this. So definitely not doing it on a phone. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, you can see. Everyone can see. So you can go through the bills and look and see it, and it's very interesting. You can spend a lot of time doing it because you see what the most controversial bills are, and sometimes they surprise you. Sometimes they don't. It's what you think. It's any bills that have to do with gun control or abortion, the kind of the hot button topics. You get a lot of people chiming in, but I think one of the more controversial ones, or had a lot of comments, was the one to name the wild horse as the state equine or whatever. That one just lit up, and we're like, oh, okay, I guess. I mean, I get people feel strongly about it, but I didn't think it would be the top bill over gun control bills, but it was for a little bit. But yeah, that's something you can see. I can go over that if we have time. I kind of wanted to get through a few other things. I don't think we're running too tight on time, but I wanted to get through some other stuff. So any other quick questions? I do want to move on. So one of the things Alexis mentioned is that legislators look at the opinions. So I kind of wanted to take a minute to go over what are some other ways to get your opinions over to the legislators. So say you've gotten to this point, you've read the bill, you understand the bill, and say you didn't understand the bill. Say you're like, well, I'm not going to go read all those Nevada administrative codes. I don't have time for that. What you can do, if you go back over to the overview, you can go to the sponsor, and in this case, it's a committee, so it's a little more vague. So say Alexis was the sponsor of this bill. Her name would be right there. It would say primary sponsor, Assemblywoman Alexis Hansen. Hopefully it doesn't say assembly member, but it might. You would click on her name. In this case, it's the committee, and it takes you to the committee, which is also a useful thing to have. It tells you when the committee meets. So this particular committee meets every morning at 8 o'clock in room 3143. So say they had scheduled the hearing for that bill. Well, now you know what time this committee meets, you know what room they're in. The legislature is a public building. You can go in there. You have to go through the metal detectors. You're not allowed to bring in firearms, but it's like a library. Anybody is allowed in there. And you can go in there and you can watch the hearings in person. They also live stream all of the hearings, but if you wanted to do it old school, or like Alexis said, it makes an impact when you show up in person. So you can also gauge the controversial bills by how many people are in the building. If a really controversial bill is happening, there's a lot of people in the building. People just show up from the public because word gets out, churches tell their members stuff, people send out emails and people show up. So that also sends a message. It's not just online. It's a physical presence is very important as well. But say you had a question about the bill, and in this case, you're given the contact information for the committee. You could call the committee, and it'll take you to the committee manager. And if you weren't sure who else to talk to, you could just ask them, say, hey, I had a question about Assembly Bill 1, like, who brought this? Where can I find more information? They may be able to point you in the right direction. Some other people you might be able to contact, though, it tells you all of the members who sit on that committee. So if you wanted to just start one by one, you could talk to the chair. That's probably a good place to start. They're in charge of the committee. So if you click on her, Venetia Considine, it takes you over to her page. It gives you all sorts of information about her. She represents District 18. Her email's over here, her mailing box. The phone numbers should be listed, and I think the reason they're not, I can double check with Alexis. They're still setting up everyone's office, so I don't think anyone's been assigned phone numbers yet. Is that why they're not listing the phone numbers on here yet? Or did they take that off? I hope they didn't. Because phone calls are actually a pretty effective way to get a hold of people as well. So if you're not able to show up in person, if you're somebody who has a day job, it's a little hard to get into the legislature on a Tuesday at 9 a.m. when they're holding a hearing. But if you can get away for 10, 15 minutes and make a phone call, that's just as effective. So I keep me on this, because if they don't end up putting the phone numbers on there, I'll have to figure out a different way to get you guys. That's for the committee. That's for the committee. So the committee will take you to the committee manager, but they're just a staff member. I don't mean just a staff member, but they're not probably the one who thought up this idea. They're just working there. They may be able to help you, and because you could ask them, you could say, well, what's Venetia Considine's office number? And she could give it to you, but I'm pretty sure the reason the phone number is not listed, at least this is what I'm hoping, is that everyone's still getting their offices set up. I hope they didn't take the phone numbers off. So this is where the phone number should be, and hopefully will be, but we'll keep in touch on that. So a couple other things when you're just on the legislator page. It tells you, District 18, where is that? It's down in Clark County. You can click on some of these maps and expand it. Looks like she represents kind of a southeast part of Las Vegas. I'm not super familiar with Vegas. Tells you a little bit about her career and personal life if you want to just kind of find out about her background, her education. Even tells you their spouse and children. Tells you all the different committees she sits on. So obviously she's the chair of government affairs. That's how we found her in the first place. But she also is a member of natural resources, and she is a member of the revenue committees. And then over here, it tells you all the different bills that she has sponsored. So primary sponsor, this is ones that she's directly sponsored. You have Assembly Bill 218. And co-sponsors just means like if Alexis were to bring a bill, but other legislators really liked it, they can co-sign or co-sponsor onto that bill, and they're just adding their name saying, I really like this bill, so I'm going to co-sponsor it. But they're not the primary sponsor. It wasn't their idea, so to speak. Any questions about the legislator contact page? Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that is something you can do, and I'll kind of go over that. You can, yeah, so there's an email for the committee, and it says, please submit all documents in support of your testimony to this email. If the bill is being heard in that particular committee, email them your document, and they'll enter it into the record as a oppose or support. So I would definitely recommend doing a little bit of both. It's easy to find the bills you don't like and be against them, but if you find bills you like, it's also good to do the same thing, get people to sign on. We really love this bill. We'd encourage, because that encourages legislators. It is tough work, and they get discouraged because people are negative all the time, but if you send in a thing saying, no, this is a great bill, we really support your work, that can help a bill get across the finish line too, so there's kind of both ends of the spectrum. Yeah, they would look at that and they would see, okay, 1,000 people sign on to this in support. So yeah, that's definitely, you don't need to duplicate efforts. I think that's kind of where we're getting at earlier. If you've signed certain people, you don't need everybody reading the bill. If you have your kind of assigned people to read it, you want to assign competent people who are reading it thoroughly. You want to make sure they're doing it correctly, because it wouldn't be fun if you misread a bill and you went through all that trouble of something that was a mistake. But yeah, when you find those people, then everyone else can kind of just say, well, I trust you, I'll sign on. You say it's a bad bill, I trust you. That's kind of how the caucus works with Alexis. Not everybody has the time to become an expert in every bill. So that's a fair point. So that's just one committee. I'll jump back and show the rest of the committees, since that is a tab up here. So back towards the top in Nellis, when we started looking at legislation, one of the other tabs is this committee tab. You can click on all standing committees, conference committees, or if you wanted to look at a specific committee, there you got the assembly committees and the Senate committees. A lot of them correlate, but there are a few little differences. So, you've got Assembly, Commerce and Labor, Senate, Commerce and Labor, Assembly, Education, Senate, Education. So you can click on any one of these and it'll give you that same information that we got with the last one. So let's click on Education. Tells you when they meet. So they don't meet on Mondays. They meet Tuesday, Thursday at 1:30 in room 3138. They don't meet on Wednesdays. They don't meet on Fridays. So some of the committees meet every day. Some of them have a staggered. So you're going to have to go through and look. If you wanted to see any specific upcoming meetings, that's where you'd click. But because we're not in session, there are no specific upcoming meetings. That's where they'd put like the meeting agenda, any documents. So they do publish the documents. If you were to submit a document in support or opposition to a bill, they would publish that along with the agenda. In fact, they publish that along with the bills directly. So I'm going to jump back to a previous session real quick. I'm still going to cover the legislation, but I just want to show you what a bill looks like that has some stuff filled in. So like once we're in the process, you'll start seeing what it looks like when it goes through different hearings, different committees. So I'm just going to jump back to the last session. 82nd session 2023. And this is always useful too, because sometimes they bring back a bill, or they talk about a bill that died last session that they want to bring back. So if you want to go back and reference whatever bill they're talking about from the last session, you can just jump back to a previous session by doing it right there. AB 400. So legislation, assembly bills. And the way I showed you to do it before was just kind of scrolling down, but now that we're in one that has 531 results, we're not going to do that. So There's a nice little feature up here where you can search. So that's another place where if you don't want to go through bill by bill by bill, you can type in keywords. You can type in education. I don't know if I can spell it right, I guess. $74 results. So there were 74 bills that, and these are ones that have the word education somewhere directly in them. There could be other bills that affect education, but because they didn't have that specific keyword, and you can just go through and look at them. But the one you said was what, AB 400? Yeah, we're going to. So this is one of those ones that was declared exempt. I mentioned all those deadlines, but there are a few. The governor, his bills are kind of important. Declared exempt. Effect on local government may have a fiscal impact. So this is what I was talking about earlier. This one may cost local governments money. Effect on the state, yes. This bill is going to cost the state money. So we kind of want to know that. Most recent history action. So this one, chapter 387, that means it was signed into law. It's in the Nevada chapter, so it made it through the process. But now we can see upcoming hearings, none. Past hearings. So it went through Assembly Education. If you wanted to watch that hearing, you could click here. You'd view it if you wanted to look at the agenda. So I'm just going to click on that. Let's say we wanted to watch the hearing. Well, some of these hearings run hours long. So instead of watching the entire thing, if you just wanted to watch the section on that bill, when you're on this screen that has the video, there's a little prompt over here that has the agenda. And you can click right to the part where, well, I guess they don't have it in here. Oh, because they just introduced it. Well, in theory, you could click on the timestamp where it shows it. So I'm going to go back because I think it's in a different hearing. Yeah, just discussed as a BDR. So that's why it wasn't showing up. So over here, it gives you a little information about why it was in that committee. And when it just says discussed, that means they didn't actually hear the bill. It was just mentioned, so they had to put it, they had to list it. Was there something you wanted to add, Alexis?
Yeah. Hello? So poor Kevin, I set him up. So the reason you're seeing all this meetings keep going down, the governor doesn't actually get a meeting until May. Keep watching. May. Okay.
Oh, you're right, yeah.
This was the games they play. So the majority has control of the legislature, the majority party. So the governor is in the opposite party. So they didn't give the governor a hearing. That's why you kept seeing it get agendized, bump it. Agendized, bump it. Mm-hmm. They didn't give a single one in the minority party a hearing for any of our bills, or even the governor, till we got to May 23rd, was it? May 31st? May 31st.
May 31st, yeah. Which is
like 3 days before we end.
That's very late in the game. Yeah,
and this was a huge education reform bill. So, and if, but I just wanted you to kind of see, this is where there's meetings are shown, but then no meetings happen. There's a bunch of amendments. Finally, he did get his bill through. They gutted it a bit, but he did get some things through. If you don't mind, go up to the amendments. Oh, that's okay. So amendments at the top, you can see there were 2 amendments. And then now when you see that number, that's how many amendments we've gotten to at this point in the legislature, not on this bill, but that's how many amendments have come across our desks. Changing an original bill, a bill rarely starts out this way and ends that way. I have this map in my office, I should have brought it. There's a bill that's introduced, and then this is how it works. And then maybe it comes through. Although it is supposed to be hard to pass a bill. It is. We don't want bills passed willy-nilly. But anyway, a lot of amendments. Then you get the the votes. So you want to show them how the votes work? You can see how your legislator voted. And this is important. So in the assembly side, you can see there were 42. We finally got to a point that you got most of the people on board. Now, you're looking at the Senate side, and you're going, what's going on? They had, no, they were the same as us, 1 nay. So they finally had worked it out. Deals had been made, and the governor finally got what he needed through. And so you'll see the majority voted yes. But it wasn't that way.
And you can see who it was, too. So this drops down.
Yeah, it shows. I wonder who that was. Yeah. And I think, and I'll tell you why it was no, because there wasn't funding for charter school teachers. There was a pay raise for all school teachers, public school teachers, charter school teachers, our public school teachers. They didn't get it. That was a hill to die on. The D's would not budge on that. The Republicans fought for it. The governor fought for it, but you have to pick and choose, get more, at least some of your reform. And so, but Senator Hansen, he was still so upset about it, says nope. Anyway, sorry,
Yeah.
I keep butting in on
No,
poor
I'm
Kevin.
glad you picked that one because it even threw me for a loop for a second. So, yeah, this is a huge red flag that it's been through this many committee hearings. That's a large amount, but I'm glad you brought it up because it's a good to see over here is this kind of, well, what happened in the committee? Mention not agendized, mention no jurisdiction, mention no jurisdiction, mention no jurisdiction, mention not agendized, that means they were messing with the governor by, well, we're going to send your bill over here. Well, we're going to send your bill over here. And then we're going to send you, because then they kept telling him, oh, no, it's in the education committee, and they're looking at it. Well, now it's over in this committee. So they were just sending him on a wild goose chase.
Mm-hmm.
And this was pretty unprecedented. I think it's typical from my understanding. I mean, I haven't been around for a while, but the governor, regardless of party, is usually at least given a fair hearing of his or her bills. They're not going to pass them. You know, if you got a Republican governor trying to pass a Republican bill, the Democrats aren't going to pass it and vice versa, but they would at least give it a hearing out of respect. And so this was kind of unprecedented in that sense. I mean,
Nope.
correct me if I'm wrong, but this was
No.
something that was like,
Absolutely right, because I've been there since 19. So in 19, we had a trifecta. So, you know, we all believe in checks and balances. That's how the Constitution was set up, that we want there to be a little bit of check and balance. I'm in the legislative branch. When in 2019, Democrats had, and they still do, they have control of both houses. So you want maybe, and in Nevada historically, we have always kind of done that. It's just been since about 2017 on, and I could talk about that a little bit later, but the way it worked in Nevada historically is you had a Senate and an assembly that I serve in. One of the parties would have the majority and the other house would have the majority. And then the governor in Nevada flips back and forth, Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican. But we've moved into a hyper-partisan, more of the national parties dictating down to the state. And so we've seen this trifecta and gerrymandered maps for our districting. So then you see this imbalance, even though a third, and a third in registration, a third D, a third R, and a third independent. But our legislature doesn't reflect that because they've controlled the mapping because the legislature writes the maps. But not anymore. The national DNC writes the maps that we just did in 21. So that's why there's this disparity. There's only 15 of one party in the assembly out of 42. In the Senate, there's only 8 out of 21. When the state numbers reflect that D's and R's are really a lot closer. So, but there's this disparity. But anyway, yes, unprecedented. You need that check and balance. And so they jerked his chain, for lack of a better term, completely disrespectful and nothing I've ever seen. And I followed Nevada politics for a lot of my life. My father was an elected official way back in the 1970s and the 80s, and you know we just don't see that kind of thing back then. So.
yeah, I'll say the more common thing that that was a specific case of the government. The more common thing is a lot of times they just don't even give hearings. So that is rare that they would mess with somebody at that level. typically, when they just don't like a legislator or they don't want to pass it, they just don't even give them a hearing. That's just that. So that's the more common way. You'll see a bill gets introduced and then just nothing ever happens with it. But yeah, you can see 19 meetings over here. That's kind of unprecedented. There's a couple more quick things I want to go over because somebody brought it up. So these exhibits, that's where if you submitted something to the committee, they would post it here. And of course, it's not showing up. But that's where, so PDF versions of any exhibits submitted would be listed there. Okay, now they're showing up. So yeah, you can see right here, letter in support submitted by Valeria Gurr. She's a private citizen. She submitted a letter, so your church could do the same exact thing. We submit. Yeah. So you can click on it. You can look at it. She took the time to write a nice letter, and then, you could have the list of people that signed, and that's public information, so everyone can see it. You would email the committee. Yeah. So I can go over that again because that is kind of an important thing if anybody wants me to go back to that step. I do want to show you real quickly, as we can probably end on this, one more thing. I'll show you a more typical bill, what the process looks like going through it. I think I picked, we can just pick a random one. Pick AB 50. So meetings 5, that's a more normal number. This one was also declared exempt. You got all the same information. This was a committee bill from the Judiciary Committee, Chapter 264, so that means it was enacted into law. So this is what it should normally look like. You got the first committee, Assembly, Judiciary. Over here, the description, it was heard. The bill had a hearing. Assembly, Judiciary, again, that's when they voted it out of committee, do pass. That means they voted to pass it. Then it went to Assembly, Ways and Means. All that means is that it had some sort of cost associated with it. So the Ways and Means Committee specifically deals with any bill that has monetary attachment to it. So they heard it and they passed it. Then it swapped over to the Senate. They heard it in Judiciary. They passed it. And then Senate Finance amended it. So those are all the meetings. This one wasn't recorded. You could go back and watch any one of these meetings. So what I wanted to show earlier, you click on it. You've got it. But say you don't want to watch a 4-hour-long meeting. You go to the agenda. You click on this part right here where it says AB 50. And it takes you right to the part where the bill hearing starts. So that's for past legislation. I think we're kind of training you guys to look more towards the future, so you want to not be watching hearings in the past. You want to be kind of watching them live. But, if you don't have time and you need to watch a hearing the next day because you want to get caught up, that's how that would work for this session too. I think we're running up on the time, so I'll stop there. I think I hopefully gave you guys at least the real meat and potatoes of how to read a bill, how to look up a bill, how to comment on a bill. Just the final comment, I would say, if there's one thing you can do to be the most effective, go and meet with your legislator in person if you're able to. That's by far the most effective thing you can do. Showing up in person. If you have to take time off work, I know it's not easy, but if you're able to make it work, showing up, scheduling a meeting with your legislator is the most influential thing you can do. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So Kevin was able to cover Nellis, which is the electronic way to connect with what's going on, when the hearings are going to be, what bills are coming up, how to make electronic comment and things like that. And I'd like to welcome up to the stage Assemblywoman Henson to talk with us about the people side of the equation and her perspective as an Assemblywoman on how you can connect with the legislators.
Hello? Am I on? Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kevin, and I'm sorry I interrupt. Now you know what Senator Hansen puts up with. So real quick, I want to clarify. The reason I have my phone in my hand is I reached out to Kelly, my wonderful assistant, and she said they are changing over a little bit on the opinion. They're fine-tuning it. The opinion page, actually, the reason you're asked to put your address in is because it sends it to your legislator of your district. So when we're getting those opinions, we're just getting our district. So that's why your address is in there. It's not viewable. And like I said, they're going from, so really, truly, it's meant for your legislators. That's good to know. The second thing I wanted to clarify was, she said, the reason the phone numbers weren't on there, she said, that she thinks they're working on the system. When you want to see your legislator, how can I contact their specific office? When you look at who's my legislator and you see my office number, she said right now it's showing up under FAQ, frequently asked questions, but she thinks it's just a bug and they're fixing it. So, and then this point about coming and seeing us as legislators, highly recommend, but go ahead though and make sure you call. My door is always open, and so are most legislators, but we do have a lot of lobbyists come and see us about specific industry bills, which is an important thing for us because we can't, I don't know things about, hydroelectric power, right? I need people from the industry to come and tell me more about why they're concerned about this legislation or why they support it. So I want you to not drive over there and feel frustrated that I'm in a hearing and that I'm meeting with some lobbyists. So we'll make time for you. Just make sure you call our office and then set a time that works for you and come and meet with not only who your legislator is, but if there's a bill you're following, this is part of the effectiveness of lobbying per se for a bill that you're supporting or you're worried about, is you want to find out what committee the bill's going to. That's important to know. So say it went to government affairs, like the one we saw. Then you're going to find out who's on government affairs, because we can't be on every committee. So I told you the 3 that I'm on. Most legislators are on about 3 committees. And then you find out who those are, and it's split between D's and R's. And I highly recommend you visit all, if you have the time, depending on how important that bill is, you talk to every one of those members on the committee. And go and see them about that bill. And there's typically, 10, 12, 11, it's usually an odd number. And that might sound like a lot, but maybe there's just 1 or 2 that you need to visit with. That's really, for them to get feedback from you that are on the ground and living in a certain experience that's super, super effective. Let's see, some of the other things. I know we talked a little bit about it. We have a high threshold. Raise your hand if you've ever testified at a school board meeting. Okay. Raise your hand again if you testified at a county commission meeting. Great. How many of you testified at the Nevada legislature? Okay. So all of those, so some of you are familiar, and they have different, I live in Washoe County. Our school board meetings and our county commission meetings are extremely contentious. And we don't have that atmosphere at the legislature. And I would like to see kind of that standard that we have at the legislature be able to filter down. I don't know what it is. Is it just because it's a state building, there's a certain amount of a decorum, we're just so mirrored on the national model? I don't know what it is, but there is an expectation, of course. We are pretty strict. Our legislative police, the chairmans, they crack down. If you're disrespectful, if you come in with an attitude that's extremely inflammatory, if you're accusatory, they're going to cut you off. Now, they don't necessarily do that in school board, and I think people should be able to express themselves. I think your passion should be heard, but I can tell you, being around this so long, you hurt the cause when you do that. There are many of the people that I love and care about, and the issues I care about, it's some of my people that go off the rails. And I'm like, please don't do that, because they have really important points. I've heard their arguments, just talking with them. Remember that we need to have respect for the institution, whether it be at the school board level, the county commission level, and the state level. And believe me, the Hansons are known for getting some little, we can be kind of pointed. I can ask pointed questions, but I'm never disrespectful. So just always kind of check yourself on that, check your tone. when you go to testify. Also, they keep you to usually 2 to 3 minutes, so time yourself at home. Practice your comments. Feel free, people get nervous, feel free to read it. And then some hearings will have, and everybody's there, and a lot of them have the same arguments. So the chair might try to control you by saying, don't be redundant. And then you're sitting in the audience going, well, they just said what I wanted to say. And you're feeling like, uh-oh, am I going to get cut off because I'm being redundant? Sometimes when meetings go long, people will get up and go, well, I just want to say ditto to what they said, but feel free to add one more little thing, maybe. You don't have to say a lot if everybody's already said it. So that helps. Frankly, this is what we're here for. And when I see my chairman and them getting all like, we gotta go to lunch, I'm going, no, we don't. We're only here 120 days, and most of us could do without having lunch. So why are we rushing to have lunch? So it's like, so part of me is like, this is the people's house. Let the people have their say. Quit controlling them with their time. So part of me, but I'm not a chairman, and that's the other part of the process that I think you understand, but I want to reiterate it. When you get frustrated with your elected official that maybe has the same party affiliation as you, but that party affiliation's in the minority, the majority party has all the chairmanships. The chairman, so it's the same party for every chairman. And the balance of every committee is 2 to 3 members over the threshold for a vote of what the minority party is. So there's like 5 of me, but there's 8 of them, right? Now, it sounds like, well, then how do you ever have a win? I can tell you there's been some really wonderful little miracles. And this is where we believe this. There's a time and a season for all things. In the legislature, there's a time to develop relationships with those on the other side of the aisle. It doesn't mean you're a sellout, because you're going to need those individuals. And there are some that are more aligned with you than you know. And there have been people I never in a million years thought they were really super far to the one side than me, and they helped us kill bills in a committee because it was a gun bill of all things. There were people that were on the other side of the aisle that we finally talked with, and we had built kind of a relationship of trust. And, I didn't go around on social media calling them this and that, and, that they don't love their country and this, That kind of helps if you don't do that in my position. So we were able to kind of coalesce around our concerns, and we got the bill killed. Not every gun bill, but that one was a real scary one. So you never know. Politics makes for strange bedfellows, and so relationships are important. I know it's a community of faith. We go the extra mile. We turn the other cheek. We forgive 70 times 7, and we still need to do that. I've gotten a little bit more realistic about what to expect, but I don't give up. I still believe that maybe, just maybe, I can have an influence. And there have been those little victories that I'm able to, if I can't get my way on a bill, I at least on the record, we always say that a lot, on the record, because everything's recorded for history, I can ask a question that at least makes them accountable to explain the lunacy of this bill. I can ask it in a good way, but rather than them just getting a pass, like people say, well, why do you even want to be there? You have no power. I might not have power, but I'm not really there for the power. I'm there for influence. So it's like, okay, so you want to do this and this and this with this bill, which is like insane. So how can I have you tell everybody publicly with a really good question and have them say it on the record? And at least make them squirm a little when they go to push that green button for yes, that at least I brought it up, or one of my colleagues brought up why this just doesn't seem right. And so that is and that's what you can do when you come and testify, is that's on the record. They've got to hear it. They got to digest it. I'll tell you a really great experience I had. I sit to a really young legislator in this. We have our offices, then we have our hearing rooms where the bills go, but then we have the floor, we call it. So those are the chambers. And on the floor is where we do the votes to pass it out of our house to the Senate, and then their bills come over to us. So it's this whole exchange. So on the floor, my desk mate, young gal, she was newly elected. She just served her second term last time. It's going to be her third now. But I got to really know her. Oh my goodness, her and I couldn't be further apart on the issues. Oh my gosh. But there was something about her. I felt like a mom, right? I feel like a mom to a lot of people. And she's probably all of 28 years old. Has her PhD, but that's all she's ever done. No real life experience, right? But I could tell she had a genuine heart, and she was just misguided. And that is what I have learned. Now, does that mean that there aren't people there that don't really have just really terrible, evil ideas? Yeah, there are. But the majority, to be honest with you, the difference is this. We care, they care, but we have different ideas how to get from point A to point B. But yes, there are some forces that are trying to disrupt our families, our communities, or whatever. But for at least some of the ones, especially the ones that I connect with, they're just good-hearted people that kind of have, I call it misguided do-goodness. So anyway, her and I have conversations. We're going to vote on a bill. And I can tell she's struggling with it. She's like, what do you think? Tell me this. And I'm giving her some ideas. And she's like, yeah. Pushes the button, it's green. Because if they don't, then it's the sheep. They got to be sheep. And so then there's consequences. Then they get punished. And they don't get chairmanships. And they don't get their bills heard. So there's all that gamesmanship. And I don't tell you that to discourage you and say, well, I'm have nothing to do with this, because what's it good's it going to do? I believe it's important to be involved because I think we're accountable to a higher power. Like when the day of reckoning comes, it's like, okay, and this all was a dumpster fire. What were you doing? And I can say, well, the forces weren't necessarily in my favor, but I tried this and this and this. So that's sometimes how I rationalize why I'm doing what I'm doing. And but there are these victories. There is an opportunity for you to touch the heart of a legislator that you never would have thought you could have. Even if they don't share the same value set, you might find that one subject that you can. And the only way you can do that is to develop relationships. And so that's why decorum, being respectful, is super important, all the way down to school board, to county commission, which, let me say here, school board members and county commission have the hardest jobs out there. My job is a lot easier at the state level. So anyway, I've talked a ton. Any questions?
We'll have an opportunity for questions in just a few minutes.
Okay.
Thank you so much for giving
Sure,
us
absolutely.
that perspective and insight. We're going to take just like a 3-minute break. It's not enough time for any socializing, but if you really need to use the restroom or grab another cup of coffee, we'll have just enough time for that, and then we'll be back for the Q&A session where we'll open it up to the floor. We'll bring you a microphone, make sure everybody hears the question, and go from there. Thank you. All right, 2-minute warning. Okay, if you can, again, take a seat. We'll welcome back Alexis Hanson and Kevin McGee. And as they make their way up here, I want to just reiterate one thing that Assemblywoman Hanson said about having an effect and reaching out to those legislators. We here in Lyon County are closer to where the legislature is going to be and where they have those offices and where you can go see them than about 90% of the state. So we're in a position that's pretty fortunate to be able to make it convenient for us to have that influence. Imagine if you lived in Las Vegas, coming to Carson City to meet with someone in the Senate or the Assembly. That's a long way. And so it's convenient for us. In the state of Nevada, rough numbers, about 70% of the residents, 70% of the state Senate, 70% of the state Assembly is from the Las Vegas area. That's pretty overwhelming. When it comes to the rest of the state, Reno and Carson City, they make up about 15% of the residents and the representatives. And the rest of the state, that's the other 15%. That's the 15% that we're in here. But we're in a good position to make it convenient for us to connect with legislators personally. Before we start the Q&A, I'd like to recognize a couple that came in, a few people. School board member Tom Hendricks is here. Thank you, Tom. School board member-elect Don Carson is here. And County Commissioner Tammy Hendricks has joined us as well. Thank you. So now we're going to start the Q&A. Deanne, where's the other microphone? Okay, so never mind, Deanne. If you raise your hand, I'll come to you so that you can ask the question in the microphone, and that way it makes sure that everybody hears it and it gets in the recording. So here's our first question.
I got it. I appreciate you giving us a complete rundown about the people that are, have an opportunity to make comments or testify. On this little piece of paper that I got where it says Nevada Legislative Engagement, a comment in there says, I'm willing to make a public comment or testify in person. Now, making a public comment is a little bit different than testifying in person, because testifying has to do with something that has been an experience in your life or something you've seen or whatever. From your experience, both of you, from your experience and people that do make comments or do testify, let's say regarding some certain bill, what is your experience in the weight that is being carried to, let's say, the legislators, people in regarding a particular bill? How much weight does it really carry?
Let's see if mine's on. Hang on.
Yeah.
I don't hear it.
No.
Now, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
The color doesn't change, so thank you. I'm so glad you asked that question, because I didn't mention that. So if you didn't hear the question, public comment and testifying on a bill are two different things. So public comment is usually at the beginning of the meeting, of the hearing, and then they'll have it again at the end. Now, there was one thing that's come about with the COVID situation was we do allow now you to do public comment via the phone. We never had that before. So you do have that opportunity if for some reason you couldn't get there. And so public comment is before we hear the bill, right, and after. It's both.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. They didn't used to have it flanked, both. It was one or the other. But what's a little bit interesting is the chair will not let you do public comment about the bill that we're going to hear or that we just heard, because some people will use public comment to extend testimony. So that's an important distinction. And I'll give you a really good example of how public comment can just be so effective. So that's the difference. Public comment is a comment you want to make, but it cannot be related to the bill that is or the bills being heard at that hearing, because we'll have multiple bills in one hearing. Testimony is you're going to testify directly related to the bill that's being heard. And that is very effective because we keep track. Something that you might want to know, we keep track as legislators, at least my party does, those of us that are there. And when we're in a committee, one of us is designated kind of as the minority chair. And we keep notes on that bill for our fellow colleagues who can't be, they're not in judiciary with me. So we keep those notes, but we also we note everybody who testifies. Were they in favor of it? And a lot of times it'll be, the pastor from Calvary came and testified. I typed that in there. And then we know. And then when we're discussing the bill to go vote, we'll each take turns in our caucus meeting who's on the committees. And so I'm going to tell you what we talked about in judiciary. We're going to go down and vote on this bill. Let me pull up my notes. Well, you know what? Pastor from Calvary Chapel was there, and he said, and I even write down what they say, and this was what concerned him. And then we might have the Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce was there, and these were what their concerns with. So when you testify, we note it. We note your name, We know who you're with or if you're representing yourself. And when you represent yourself, that's just as powerful as when I get Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce, because you're an individual who came to do it. A public comment. So there was a strategy that happened in 2019 when I was a freshman, and there was a bill that the chairman, who was a lovely gentleman, he unfortunately passed away during the session, but Chair Thompson had an education bill, and it wanted to put a moratorium on charter schools being built or started, 5-year moratorium on charters, like trying to kill the charter school movement. And I'm a huge supporter of charter schools. I'm a huge supporter of choice in education. So those that were in favor of charter schools felt really hamstrung, like the chairman is carrying the bill. This is going to sail. He's going to get what he wants. Well, they set up a strategy, a lot of the people that were involved in the charter school movement, they're in the churches, in the schools, and what they did is for weeks, they testified in public comment because the bill wasn't being heard yet. So every time we went to education, here at the beginning of public comment, was them saying we're concerned about a moratorium on charter schools. They had students testify. These darling kids would come up and plead their hearts how much they love their charter school. Please don't allow other children not to have a charter school. So they did that for just a few weeks before the bill was finally going to come. And then, because we developed some relationships, myself, I don't like to take credit for stuff, but I was a freshman. But I had a really good relationship with the chair. Another seasoned colleague that was mentoring me, we went to the chair and we made our appeal and we talked to him and he agreed to take the moratorium out of his bill. Not just because of the two of us, but because of all that public comment. So that's where you can really make a difference, even when you feel like you might be in the minority and that public comment can serve you because you're not addressing the bill that's being heard, so you're not breaking a rule. But they're just hearing over and over like, oh my gosh, this moratorium on charter schools is going to be terrible. So I hope that answers the question.
I have one thing to add, too. One of the reasons it's important to keep up on amendments to a bill, because if you do take the time to go testify, or even if you're calling in, you want to make sure you're up to date, because you could be testifying against something or for something that's been removed from the bill. And so you're giving an impassioned speech about why you don't like this bill, and they're going, that was amended out. So then you just kind of takes the air out of it. So you want to make sure you're up to date and go, oh, I didn't know that. It's good news, but at the same time, you want to make sure you're up to date.
That reminds me of the old Saturday Night Live sketch where it always ended up with, never mind.
Yeah, that's
so we're ready
to
for.
I mean, it happens. I mean, there's a lot of amendments. There's a lot going on, but.
Another question here.
It's just so I understand, it's related to the last one. So you're either case testifying, you're giving public comment about something, but when you're testifying, you're speaking on a specific bill, and you have to do it at the time that's open for speaking, versus public comment is just you're telling them something that's on your mind or that's going on.
Exactly.
Just so I understand the difference.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And they'll even break it down during the testimony. They'll say those testifying in support, and they'll give them time. Then they'll move over those testifying against, and then they'll even do those testifying in neutral.
Thank you. We have another question here.
Can you expand a little bit about, it seems like either someone who submits a bill, like a legislator who wants a bill passed, would want to tell people like us who you think are like-minded that we should support your bill, but we wouldn't know about it because we're just out here in the community. Oh, and then secondly, if we're trying to do the tactic that you were talking about where we're not trying to expect it's just going to be a party line vote, can we call in our case, it would typically be, at least now in this legislature, we'd be talking to the minority, to the second in command, so to speak. Can we call you and say, which of those Democrats are people that we would want to make an appointment with to try to influence, and you could help us to figure out where to focus our energy?
Yes, such great questions. Again, stand up because I'm bending on the microphone. The second point about, yes, you can always contact your legislator that, and say, who do you think would be best for me to lobby? Like, if you already know that I'm on your side on this, yes, I can, each of us have learned to develop the personalities and know who's going to be more receptive to letting you come in and have a conversation. So that's a great point. The second one was, your first question was about? Oh, right. So if I submit a bill and I want to get you guys involved, so what happens is first of all, I hope I get a hearing. Like how many did I have last time? I had like 10. You get so many bill draft requests, and then you submit those, and then you hope to get a hearing.
It's not just hope, you have to work for it.
Yeah, you've got to first of all, you got to get a hearing. So you got to get in good with the chairman that they're going to give you a hearing. And then if the chairman says, okay, I'll hear your bill, then your work is that you've got to work now, for instance, some bills have required me for months to work with different stakeholders to dial in. I'm carrying the bill this time on behalf of law enforcement, Washoe County Sheriff's Office, to simply just add 2 words to existing statute. Now, in the commission of a warrant for those who are involved in sex trafficking, child pornography, or some sort of sexual abuse of a child, the warrant, if I remember this right, the warrant goes through the district or the Supreme Court. Well, they need to have more options. They want it to go through justice court and municipal court. So you would think that would be an easy lift, right? I just want to put 2 words. I just want to put 2. But there's that means a caseload for the courts. So I've got to do all this background work ahead of time, work and find out who the stakeholders are, how you're going to be affected by this bill. That's all the work that goes into being able to present a bill, not just have you come testify, but if I haven't set it up for success by doing all this background work, like already anticipating what's my opposition going to be. Is the DA's office going to be okay with it? And it's not just one DA. There's 17 counties, 17 DAs. Or how about down the line, right? So I line up all that. I get a consensus. Now I'm going to present the bill in a hearing. And that's when I get people that I know that'll come and testify, usually law enforcement people, whatever. But then the public, maybe public that's been affected in a negative way by this bill, the reason they need this bill. So a lot of legislators, they do a newsletter like I do. I know Assemblyman Gray does. Do any of you get him? You can get on a newsletter list and then say, let me know. I want to come. I want to support your bill. And so that's kind of how I get the word out and I get the public to come. For the most part, there's a lot of organizations out there that do this work. They'll say, hey, Assemblyman so-and-so has this bill and gets it out there in the public, and these advocacy groups, or if you have a tracking group in your church that wants to be a part of a newsletter, you'll get word of it that way. But it's a huge importance to have public, not just industry and not just the stakeholders come, but the public support your bill. So I'm super glad you asked that. Ask your legislator to let you know when he or she has a bill that you want to know about, and they'll put you on an email list.
Further questions?
Well, I wanted to add, that was one of the perks. It's a shame you can only track 10, but bills that you track in Nellis, it sends you updates. So like if the bill's been scheduled for a hearing, as soon as it gets scheduled, it sends you that, so you know. So if you wanted to follow all of Alexis's bills, in theory, it's a shame that they limit you, but you could follow all of her bills, and so you'd know exactly when, her bill's getting a hearing next week, or her bill's being voted on next week. It would automatically update you. So any that you track on Nellis updates you automatically on where the bill's going and any updates to it. So that's how it's supposed to work, but I guess you just kind of coordinate with other people.
Thank you.
So you talked about going into the legislature and talking to your representatives on certain bills that you're passionate about. And each one of those are individuals, and they have certain hard nose and soft spots. So as you approach them and present what you're trying to get from that bill or oppose or support, how would you get some insight into what their hard stances are and where you might be able to find some soft areas?
That's where the colleagues, those of us who served there that have gotten to know them. So you would reach out to your legislator, or maybe it doesn't have to be your legislator that represents your district. You could contact, say you know a legislator in Elko, or you know one in Las Vegas. You can reach out to them and you can ask them, hey, can you tell me exactly that? Who would I have the best luck with? Who's more receptive to what I have a point of view? Or the opposite, what are the red flags? What should I avoid? Like, maybe I'm going to testify. What are the red flags I should kind of tiptoe around when I testify? You know, even certain words, we know how that works, right? Like avoiding certain words that they're going to go, we know what you're up to. My colleagues are going to be your best help in knowing how to navigate them. And feel free, Assemblyman Gray's been there 2 sessions, and he's been in a county commission. He knows a lot of the players. Reach out to him. Reach out to me. Any legislator that you might have even just a small acquaintance with, will be glad to help you. Thank you.
We have time for one more question. And here we go.
Which I probably shouldn't, but I just want to thank you for your candidness and how you can bring down or tone down, the rhetoric that you hear so much on the media, which I can't even stand to watch. You were talking of the young woman, your colleague that's from the opposite side of the aisle, who sat next to you or near you, and it brought to my mind 2 of my nieces who were of a different political persuasion than myself, and yet they grew up much like I did. But the bottom line is we all have some core things in common. We have a mother, we have a father, we have a grandmother, grandfather. And for believers, we have to constantly remind ourselves we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but there's a spiritual battle that's going on. And it's not only for our souls, it's for their souls. So we always need to be in prayer. And then the Lord says to love our enemies, perceived enemies or not. We're supposed to love them. And that's why I really wanted to comment on what you said. I appreciate that, how you just said in the end you found some common ground with the young woman and even the late, what'd you call him, a chairman or something? A chairman of a committee.
Oh,
or
one of the
something.
committees, yep.
Yeah, anyways, I just wanted to say I appreciate that because it brings a relevance and a realness to the world that we're living in right now.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank all the attendees here for being interested enough in this subject and Nevada's future to show up and learn some more and do something. And I especially want to thank our guest speakers here, Assemblywoman Hanson and Executive Director for the caucus, Kevin McGee. What an outstanding job that you've done, and we really appreciate you coming out here and making time for us. Is there anyone here who's motivated to maybe do something more this legislative session than they've done in the past? A show of hands, anybody that's motivated to maybe testify or give public comment or send a letter or something like that? Only, 4 of you. Okay. Well,
We're going to guilt you into it.
maybe more. I want to illustrate this little like attendance slip so that we can contact you. Please fill that out if you haven't already. And in particular, one of the things, the dots on it, is so that we can send you another arm and another hand. This manual for Nellis. If you've checked the box that you'd like to get the manual, we'll get that out via email to you within the next couple of days. I'd like to invite you to look at our Community Impact Northern Nevada table out here. also the TPUSA Faith Table. Take some of those materials, consider visiting with us at our Community Impact Team meeting, which is this Sunday in just a few days at 1 p.m. right in this very room. If you have a pen on your table and would like to give it back instead of just taking it, there's a place on the table out there for that. And with that, I'm going to ask you again to take a stand and welcome back our senior pastor, Gary Least.
Guys, I gotta tell you what, we never know when we put something out what the interest level is going to be. And one of the things that I'm just so proud of is the fact that you guys are here right now. You guys know that this last election cycle was turned based upon the involvement of the citizens, we the people. We put our voices back into play, and a lot of that happened because of houses of worship, but not just because of houses of worship. And so, well done. Be involved. Our voices do count. The side that we're fighting against isn't quite as big as they think they are they? Right? Our voices matter. So I want to just say, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance and grant you peace. Go in peace. Be safe going home. God bless you. Thank you for being here tonight.
Amen. Thank you.